Hi there, you're with Matt Farrell, the Renegade Banker, and you're in the right place for useful information, tips and tricks on consumer and business finance, household and business management. Today, let's get personal. Let's talk about mindset. Joining me is Carly Walker, a Transformational Coach. She holds a Master of Psychology, and over the last decade, Carly has helped hundreds of clients shift their reality, resulting in exponential growth in their income and their fulfillment. Welcome and thanks for joining me, Carly.
Hi, Matt. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
This episode is being produced deep in lockdown, and I won't take any time listing the deprivations. You know, we're all living it. What I will say, though, is that governments, businesses, communities, households and individuals are being asked to make changes at an incredible pace. So innovations that might have taken, months and years are actually being implemented in days and weeks. We're all feeling it. Australia and New Zealand are doing really well at managing things, but there's a lot of information, there's a lot of restrictions and rules, and for businesses, this means radical shift in demand, in delivery methods. For everybody else, there's deep concern about the ongoing sustainability of their business or their employment arrangements. So while some people are thriving, I dare say that many people are working under intense pressure. And for a while there, even the simple act of buying nappies and toilet paper became a bit of a tactical and logistical exercise in my household. With most people working at home, productivity can be very challenging, especially with children on the scene or with any tech issues. And whilst there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of latitude around this new working arrangement, it is difficult to achieve high performance during these challenging times. So Carly, how do you go about working with your clients to achieve high performance?
Good question, Matt. Great question. Awesome intro, by the way. Just such a good set of the scene about everything that's going on at the moment. I'm sure there's going to be people who are watching this, from the future and remembering back to this time. So it's good to be able to have this snapshot in time of what's going on. In terms of how I work with my clients, so high performance is really about making the most amount of output or the most amount of success or steps towards a goal with the least amount of input. It's really about how to maximize how we can get the best possible outcome with the least amount of effort, energy, struggle required by the person who's doing it, right? So even before COVID hit, even before we went into this pandemic and this probable recession, I've been working with clients on how to increase their performance for decades, really, nearly decades. So in terms of how I help them, it comes down to three main aspects. We're human beings. We are holistic human beings. And if we want to change our behavior and change our output and change our results, we need to focus on these three areas. And each of them is as important as the other, right? Yep. So there's mindset, which includes the identity that we hold, who we identify as. It includes also the beliefs that we hold about what's possible for us, what's possible in general for business and the world, what we believe we're worthy of. And it also encompasses the thoughts that we have on a day-to-day basis. We have thousands and thousands of thoughts running through our minds all the time that most of us are probably not even aware of. And those thoughts are contributing in a huge part to how we behave, the energy that we hold, and the outcomes that we create, right? So that's the first part. Definitely. Second part is the emotions that we hold. So I'm sure you've experienced we met through networking, right? So you meet people at a networking event and they're there for the first time and they're holding a lot of nervous energy potentially. And the way that comes across is very different to somebody who is, I guess, they're old hat at networking. So the emotions that we do anything with are always going to come across. You said before we started recording a great little saying, your vibe attracts your tribe. It's the exact same thing in business and in every area of life, right? Your vibe, the emotional energy that you hold in your body is going to attract particular people and particular outcomes faster or slower depending on those emotions, right? And then the last part is the actions and the behaviors that we do or the strategies that we take, whether that be a business strategy, whether that be the strategy that we run to go to the supermarket, how we homeschool our kids, the actions that we take on an everyday basis. So if we just work on one of these things, it's not enough. We can create some change, but the most amount of change that we can create to ensure that people are performing at a really high standard, whether we're in a pandemic or whether we're in everyday life, is by looking at each of these three areas and tweaking the pieces that aren't necessarily working for the individual and helping them perform at a much higher standard, which ultimately not only leads to greater things like profit and market share and, you know, the tangible outcomes, but also our level of fulfillment as well, because when we can help process those difficult thoughts and feelings that we all walk around with, we end up being a much more balanced, happier, more fulfilled human being.
Yeah, that's excellent, and we could go deep in each of those. Look, that's part of the reason I invited you here today. Is I thought in these challenging times, what better opportunity for my community than to bring you in to have a chat about how we can find some performance when most of us are operating in degraded performance sort of levels. Everyone's in a different spot. I've got some friends and colleagues who are fortunate enough to be information professionals. You know, they're professionals, information workers. They can go home and they've got an office and they can shut the door, and it's perfectly effective. They do miss the human contact, and that can erode their performance over time, but they can get quite a bit done and they're almost untouched, almost.
Yep.
But I'm going to generalize and say that unless you're in that very small proportion, you've got concerns. I mean, industries have been really smashed here.
Absolutely.
Travel, tourism, hospitality, manufacturing, blue collar, white collar, it is indiscriminate in that it affects everybody, but then it particularly affects certain industries really hard. So most of us are spending a bit of time at home, and this forces us to think about community and family and the simple things in life, and possibly a back to basics approach. Now, you're in New Zealand, in Wanaka, not far from Lake Wanaka, and it's a beautiful environment. I'm in Mount Macedon, again, beautiful environment. Straight out the door, I can take the kids out for a walk and, you know, smell the fresh air, take in the views. That's nice. In the back of the mind is, this is fantastic, but I need to work. It's a degraded environment, and there's lots of conflicting priorities going on right now. Some people will be just hiding under the doona. Tell me when I can come out, and we just go back to normal. My personal view is we're not going back to normal. There is this, and I don't want to use buzzwords, but there is a new reality, new normal. And those who can be quick enough to realize and start assessing what we should stop doing, what we should start doing, and what we need to focus in on, will thrive, no doubts about it. So how do we go about finding a bit of performance in this environment?
Yeah, good question. So I think the first thing that I would always ask is looking at and taking a bit of a stock of what's not working at the moment. And so when we can see the holes, we can start to plug them, because that's how we can assess where we're losing energy, where we're potentially working too hard, where we might still be using a strategy that worked in a previous environment, in a previous reality, but doesn't necessarily work right now. So what I would recommend doing to anybody who's watching this, whether this be now, you know, during the pandemic and during a recession, or in the future, this is still relevant, is start to take a bit of a holistic look at what's going on for you at this point in time. Like you said, people's lives have come crashing into everything is happening in the home environment right now. There's schooling, there's business, there's personal life, all in one very small environment. Like you said, you and I are very lucky that we've got space around us, but that's not the reality for the majority of the world right now. And that's going to be placing so many extra pressures on people. And everybody is learning how to do this, like on the go, right? No one knows how to do this. No one knows how to make this work. And so in order for us to know how to make it work, we need to look at what's not working and figure out what we want it to look like instead. One of the things that I come up against with clients especially when we first start working together, is all they can tell me is what they don't want. I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want this anymore. I don't want that anymore. I'm like, okay, well, great. Well, what would you like it to look like instead? And sometimes we get so caught up in all the things that we don't want that we haven't actually given ourselves a chance to look at what do you actually want it to look like instead. And without that very clear goal, we can't start moving towards it, right? What we focus on is always what expands. You know, when you're driving and your attention gets distracted off the road and all of a sudden you start steering in that direction, it's the exact same with your focus and your thoughts. So if all you're doing is focusing on what you don't want, that's the direction that you're going to go in. And of course that comes with its own challenges, like frustration and anxiety and panic about, I don't want to go into a recession and you know, I want to stay in bed with a doona over my head and I don't want to face any of this. But the more we do that, the worse the situation gets.
Yeah.
And what I've been observing both in clients and in the marketplace in which I work is that everybody who has been able to put their focus towards how can I make the best of this, and not in a way where we put our heads in the sand and go, it's not happening, let's just keep going, but in a very pragmatic sense of this is happening. And we might not know what the recession is we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the economy is going to look like. We don't know what the market's going to look like in a week's time, right? We don't even know what it's going to look like tomorrow. There is so much uncertainty. But those people who have, you know, gotten out from underneath the doona and they have taken action in the direction of, I'm going to make the best of this, they've actually started creating something different. And it's as it always is with business anyway, it's test and measure, right? We never know how things are going to show up, but we've just got so much more uncertainty right now that if we can get a little bit of certainty by focusing on what we do want, we're going to start moving in that direction. And it kind of acts a bit like a snowball. Like as soon as, you know, when you roll a snowball and as you roll, it gets bigger and bigger and it gains more momentum. It's exactly like that. The more you start moving in that direction, the more you can like gain that momentum and it will get faster and faster. So to answer your question would be to look at what you want rather than what you don't want. And often that is informed by looking at what's not working and what's the opposite of that I want to focus on. Does that make sense?
It does.
Cool.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. I mean, I'm seeing a couple of things. I'm seeing two distinct poles. One is what I just call a scattergun approach. They are very uncertain. They're not sure which direction, but they just want to do something. They have to do something. So they start moving in that direction. The other is frozen. They've never seen numbers like this. They've never seen the feedback on their activities come in this way. Normally it's incremental. It's fed back through channels that they can monitor over weeks and months of performance. This is like the car crashed into a wall. And they're not used to, they're just not used to this. No one's used to this. I mean, we really are in an environment that no one has ever seen before. And those who can take a break, catch their breath, and then start to pick themselves up again and pull the pieces together and start to hone it down. You're in a good position once you start doing that and moving forward. So maybe how do you pull the elements together or get a bit of forward movement and get that snowball
Such a
happening?
good question.
Yeah,
absolutely. So you've just kind of like hit the nail on the head there. So one of the things that I mentioned before is that the emotion and the energy with which we take action from is going to determine in large part our outcome. So a lot of the people who you are seeing at the moment who are doing that scattergun approach are actually doing it out of fear and out of panic and out of anxiety. Now, that's still probably going to produce an outcome, but it might not be as good an outcome as if somebody who had taken the time to sit and process and emotionally process what is going on right now. Because taking a scattergun approach and ignoring the emotions of what's going on is actually a process that we would call bypassing, and it's not healthy, and nor does it lead to a good outcome. So one of the most important things that we can do as human beings is process the emotions that are in our body. Now, people are going through all sorts of emotions right now that they don't normally go through. There's frustration around managing the kids. There's panic about not having income coming in. There's worry about the future. We're spending a lot more time in what we would call a lower vibration emotion. And those lower vibration emotions have a heavy feel to them. And when we take action from that place, it doesn't create as good an outcome as if we take action from a place of calm and poise and confidence and assuredness that we're going to move in the right direction. This is a process that I teach clients whenever they need to process an emotion. So there's 4 steps to it.
Yep.
So the first step is to name the emotion. So first step is literally just to sit and name what you're feeling. And it might be something just like, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling worried about the future. I'm feeling annoyed that my kids won't do their work. And you just literally name the emotions. Just go through and name them.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people don't have very good emotional, range, meaning that they don't experience a large number of emotions. They kind of get stuck in a few. So if you need to, Google a list of emotions and just look at the list and be like, oh, that's the one that I'm feeling. Like, it might actually not be anger. It might be rage. And it might not be fear. It might actually be disappointment. So we have this weird phenomenon where when we can label an emotion, we actually start to express it and it starts to move through us. So naming it is the first step.
Yep.
Second step is to own it, which is really similar to the first step, in that we just accept the fact that this emotion is with us right now.
Yep.
You know, we've been conditioned to think that a lot of emotions are bad or negative, or we shouldn't experience them. You know, big boys don't cry, and, you know, toughen up and things like that. But actually all emotions are necessary.
Yeah.
And if we start judging them, then we start repressing them, and then they get stuck in us. So owning it is the second step. Like, this is mine. I'm okay with it. I might not like it yet, but I'm just going to accept the fact that it's here right now, right?
Sure.
Then the next step is to express it. Now, this is where a lot of people will struggle, because we have been taught that there are ways to express emotion that are okay and others that are not okay. And this is going to be different for the emotion and different for the person, because we all express emotions in different ways. If going for a run helps you to express your anger, then that's something that you could do. If crying in the shower helps you express your sadness, then that's something that you can do.
Yep.
So I have a whole bunch of these that I use for particular emotions for me, and so do my clients. So start to cultivate that relationship where you can go, I'm feeling an emotion and I'm going to go and express it so that it doesn't come out another way. Because we know that if we bottle these emotions up, they're going to come out in a really dysfunctional way, right?
Sure.
So step number 4 is about releasing.
Yep.
So this is the step that most people don't actually do. They get stuck in expressing the emotion in a really inappropriate way.
Sure.
But once we have taken ourselves through that process to express it, then we choose to release it. And we make a very intentional, I'm choosing to release, I've expressed, I'm going to release it now, and I'm going to move on. And I'm going to choose to realign my focus to where I want to go.
Yep.
And yes, I might, you know, eventually sometimes pay attention to the fear and the worry and the panic again, but I know that I've released it and I'm going to move forward really proactively in this direction. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So that's really helpful, Carly. So how do we just get a little momentum happening here?
Do you mean in terms of action?
Action, yeah. How to move it forward now?
Yeah, cool. So again, like I said before, if you're not clear on what you want, that would be the first step. And
Sure.
so being clear on, what do I want this to look like for now? And you would do that for particular areas of your life, for example, how you're schooling the kids, how you're working on your business, the boundaries that need to be put in place. And you would say, well, that's my ideal. That's what I want to get to, and it might not be there yet.
Sure.
You would look at what would be the first step. If I were to, you know, if you're doing this in the morning, you would say, if I were to get to the end of this day, and I know that this day has been successful, what would that look like? What would the first tiny step be?
Yep.
And you might write that down, and you might put it on a post-it on your computer, and you would check in at the end of the day, be like, did I do it? Awesome. What's the next step for tomorrow? And I would just check in. This is a process that people don't really do because they don't know to do it. But in terms of behavioral psychology,
Yep.
we only ever do behaviors that work for us or behaviors that have been reinforced. And a lot of the time when we're working towards something that's so far away, those early behaviors don't get reinforced, and so they don't continue. So by placing, you know, a post-it on it, and we pay attention to it, and we can look back at the end of the day and be like, I've done that. I did it. Like, pat myself on the back. Awesome. What's the next step? It means that we gain that momentum, and the snowball rolls faster and faster and bigger and bigger.
That's awesome. You might be able to see behind me, I've got the whiteboard here. It's in front of the desk, and up there it's just the day. Today I'm going to achieve this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
It's right in front of me, not confused about what I need to do, and I love ticking it off. And
that's such a good strategy.
Simple, but it's visible, and
I
I can see that I'm moving forward during the day. What are your thoughts or tips around just setting your day up right?
Good question. One of the things that we kind of have been conditioned to believe is that humans should work for 8 hours a day. But actually, if you're looking at high performance, we don't generally tend to get 8 hours of really good quality work in.
Yep.
And it's going to be person by person. And now, because we've got so much more freedom working from home as well, people actually have the power to play with this.
Yes.
It's actually look at, what do I want my day to look like? What would be really good for me? How does my energy work? Am I a morning person? Am I an afternoon person? Am I really on task after I go for a walk? Or, you know, when are my kids asleep? When can I get that work done so that I can have it be done and I can go and focus on other areas of my life as well?
Yeah.
That's all very good and easy to say, but we do have an addiction to working long hours. A lot of us, our self-worth is tied up in how much we do and how hard we work. So this is kind of the thing that you keep chipping away at. There's so much room for self-compassion given what's going on for everybody at the moment, that it's okay if your kids don't get all their schoolwork done. It's okay if you don't get all your work done. It's okay if you miss out on going for a run that day. It's okay if you have McDonald's for tea one night, right?
You're right.
We're trying to keep the pressures of day-to-day life from the old reality and transport them onto the current reality, where it's actually just not possible. Good structures that you know are going to work really well for you and lots of self-compassion about what's actually possible is going to take you at least a step in the right direction. And next week it might look completely different because you've learned what works for you. So ask yourself what works and give yourself the freedom to play with it.
It's really helpful advice. I did a project with a business where the head office was in Melbourne, but the operations team was in Brisbane. All of us were working remotely, and that was just normal. Shared documents, meetings, collaborative work and whatnot. And what was interesting was the Melbourne office that I was a part of was going through a renovation, and the office was closed for a couple of weeks. So we're all working from home for a couple of weeks, and we're already really comfortable with collaborative work anyway.
Yeah.
But what I found, and I think a few others found, is we missed the incidental stuff. A couple of drinks after work on a Friday, the coffee chats, let's go and have a coffee, let's go and have lunch. The whispers in the ears, the politics. You miss the signs. Who's going in for a meeting room with the CEO? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Where's the alignment? You miss all of it, right? So it'll be really interesting when we are allowed to work co-located to see people can get comfortable with a hybrid, you know, sometimes in the office, sometimes at work. Some people may not like that at all, might just want to be in the office for all the structures and stuff it provides. It's going to be really interesting anyway. But I suppose the point is you do miss the human touch, the interactions.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, human connection and belonging are the things that we need to survive. Without a tribe that we feel belonging to, we lose a lot of motivation. We lose what our basic human needs are. That's part of, even when we lived, way back in the day before we had societies, we had tribes, right? It's so important to remember that. And I know lots of people are still doing, like weekly wines on Friday nights and things like that. And I encourage anybody to continue doing those things and don't underestimate how important they are in your day-to-day life. It's really important. Yeah,
and the other thing is it's forced virtually everyone to get really comfortable with technology. So my wife is a teacher and she is a Luddite. She doesn't really like the technology. Would prefer that we have like some sort of tech bonfire when this is all done. All right, and I said that's not going to happen. But that's her wish, and we've all had to get really comfortable with it in a great big hurry. And that's just an example of the radical change that everyone's had to get used to. Now, I'm going to have another episode about what are the emerging changes in banking, but people are getting really used to, that you don't have to be in front of people to have a meeting or a check-in meeting. Cash is becoming irrelevant, signing documents electronically, interacting with computers on just the flow of the work. Once you've done all the thoughtful work, now we let the computer worry about the scheduling. So these are some really positive things to come out of it. Notwithstanding, we've got to quickly adapt to them and get used to it and hopefully go with it. That's really good. Now, I imagine you work with people and they've done the reflection and they have the direction pretty clear and they're starting to move forward and they've got some techniques to get the wins. What's your thoughts around breakthrough, like persistence? How do you keep persisting? How long do you persist on a pathway to find breakthrough? When do you know you're on the right track sustainably and you're knocking on the door and avoiding stopping and changing direction too soon? How do we manage that?
Cool. Do you mean in terms of business strategy?
Even individually, you've got a path, you're on it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know you're like really embedded on this path and you're making really good progress? Let's keep at it.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess to generalize it, anytime you set a goal, you're going to have objective, or I guess somewhat quantitative measures that you could check to see your progress along that goal. Now, I would use a process called benchmarking, in which you would look at somebody who has achieved that goal, or at least what most people would expect along that pathway to meet that goal, and you would look at what the milestones are.
Yeah.
And those would be the things that you would be aiming to work towards. So, for example, if you've set yourself a goal that's a year long, it's going to take you 12 months to get to, you would want to know what's the goal for the end of month 1.
Yeah.
And to do that, what would I need to be doing at month 2 at week 2 and week 1? So if you can break it down like that, then you've got something very tangible to measure it against. I would say you could probably do this for most things. It's just going to require a little bit of research for you if it's not already laid out, right?
Yeah.
But that would be the process that I would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I think having those is going to save you a lot of time in the long run, because you can see where you're supposed to be, or where would be a good expectation for where you could be.
Yeah.
And then you can see, have I surpassed that? Have I got time, or do I need to give myself more time to do that? But I think if we don't have that, we've got nothing to measure against. And how do we know if we're being successful or not?
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Really helpful, Carly. So
awesome.
It's been a wonderful chat, and thanks for your time. We had a lot of really practical actions and suggestions in amongst the chat. Did you have any further advice?
I think maybe not further advice, but if you guys can take away anything from this chat, would be to increase the amount of self-compassion that you have right now.
Yeah.
You know, the milestones have moved, the benchmarks have moved, and it's time that we all kind of looked and adapted to that. And that's going to require a lot of self-compassion and, I guess, letting go of what we expected beforehand. And in some cases, those goals are going to end up being even better. Like you said before, you know, there are some people who are really just absolutely, you know, making the most of this particular point in time, but that won't happen unless you can have that self-compassion for where you're currently at and adjust as you go. Yep.
Really good, Carly. Really helpful for everyone in my audience. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Now, if someone was to work with you, how would they go about that?
Awesome question. So best place to reach me would be, depending on your platform, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can just search for Carly Anna with you'll see MSci beside my name. So I can give you those links, and potentially we can add them here somewhere.
We will.
Awesome. Or Instagram would be my other preferred platform, which you can get me at carlyanna.co.
Yep.
So I'll give you both of those links, and that would be the best way to reach out, and we can have a preliminary chat about what it might look like to work with a coach and whether or not I'm the right coach for you.
That's perfect. Thanks, Carly.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Today we've stretched it a little bit. We've gone into mindset. I thought this was really important because people are having to process a lot of information and need to find some direction and a bit of forward motion. I think, Carly, you've been very helpful in giving us some really good, tangible, useful, practical ideas on how to go about this process. And I think whilst it's off my core message, I really thought it was valuable to bring us in line here and get us aligned before we go steaming ahead with, you know, improving our businesses and improving our household. At the moment, it's about keeping it moving in a very challenging environment. Thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Matt. See you guys.